Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Back in 2020, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were 2 team leaders and the office manager. The 2 teams were the content team and the SEO, search engine optimization team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that's web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and SEO team lead were carrying out the interview. As you do in interviews, when they asked if this or that could be done, I would respond, yes, of course, or, you'd get a better result doing X, Y, or Z. So I got offered the job, and for the first year, there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some red flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, we'll call him Ben, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. I would always push back and say no, and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. Ben would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I had said no. The office manager would leave it there because, at the end of the day, I was the one with the experience in web development, not Ben. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason Ben was getting so irate was that he thought I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy, that's not who I am. So now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. My team and I had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. I arrived at the hotel across the road from the head office at about 4 p.m. and jumped on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened. We found a major bug that caused a significant issue with the functionality of the website. It's at this point that I'm going to introduce the star of our story, Alex, not his real name, but affected all the same, who was my senior developer. Alex and I worked through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug at about 7 a.m. the following day. My meeting with the board was at 10 a.m., so after getting showered, fed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours of sleep. I went into the meeting, and the first thing that was said was the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. I explained, "We found an issue with the sites yesterday, and Alex and I worked through the night to fix it before the meeting." The CEO responded, "That's dedication, I'm impressed. How are you holding up?" "I'm running on coffee and adrenaline, but I'm ready to present," I replied with a tired smile. Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything, then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London and then another hour home. I thanked him and went on my way. After taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you, the office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar, not my sort of thing, I'm a man of cheap tastes, and then everyone moved on to a small club. I went to the club for a bit but then left quite early in the night as I needed to get a train home. I said my goodbyes and then headed home. I came into the office on Monday and there was something going on. I spoke with Sarah, not her real name, the content team's lead. She didn't know what was going on, but there were people from head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders were called into a meeting. We were all squished in one of the small meeting rooms. There was the office manager, 2 members of the HR team from head office, and the 3 team leaders, including myself. HR explained that there had been a complaint made against Alex. A member of the SEO team, we'll call him Raj, had called Ben on Friday saying that Alex had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both Sarah and I were taken aback. This was not like Alex. On a side note, I feel that I need to explain the backgrounds of people involved. This is just for context and not an attack on anyone involved. Alex, Sarah, and I are white British. Ben is of African descent, born in Britain, I believe, and Raj is of Indian descent, once again, I believe. The whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people who were there that night, and we then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews was that no one had heard anything like what Raj was saying, so it was Raj's word against Alex's. This was not acceptable for Ben. He wanted Alex fired and cried, "We can't have someone like that in the office." Both Sarah and I looked at each other and thought it was strange that he was so insistent on firing Alex with no evidence. Both the office manager and HR agreed, and Alex was let off with a warning and told to be aware in the future of how things he says could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office, that is until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone around the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Ben and Raj talking and thought I should know. We went into one of the meeting rooms and he laid everything out. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, steam would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked and a plan that Ben had to attack my team because I wouldn't bend to his demands. He and Raj were on a call outside the club. Ben wasn't there that night, and that's when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Alex and get him fired, which would then lead to Ben complaining that I wasn't fit to run a team if I let that sort of thing happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Ben and Raj. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was furious. There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Alex what I had been told and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Alex to get angry and do something that would get him fired or worse, affect any revenge I could dish out. So, I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main stairwell with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairwell also led to a door out to the street. At the time, I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from the screen and clear my head if something I was working on wasn't going well. So, I walked out of the door to the office and into the stairwell, and who was there? Raj, of all people. He was on the phone, and he went white as a sheet when he saw me. Now he was mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I was walking past, he was forced to carry on the conversation. I overheard, and from what he was saying, I could tell that he was talking to a school or something like that. The conversation sounded like he was looking for information about applying and about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. "Hey, got a minute?" I asked. "Sure, what's up?" the new office manager replied. I explained to him what I had overheard Raj talking about on the phone and said, maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. The office manager looked concerned. "Thanks for bringing this to my attention, I'll look into it." So, a week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then BAM! Raj stopped showing up to the office. A few days later, I got told what had happened from one of the other SEO team members. Raj had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company didn't want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Raj was from Dubai, and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished, and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That's when it all clicked. Now there are some dodgy people in London, and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake colleges that would sign people up to get visas to live and work in the UK. At some point before or after this, I saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat in, let alone be a college. They were used as postal addresses for the college, and they would charge a course fee to be enrolled and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So what Raj was trying to do was to get enrolled in one of these colleges so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Raj and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new college course. Bye, Raj. When I found out that Raj had been let go, I pulled Alex aside and filled him in on everything. He couldn't believe it and was stunned that they would try and do that. I apologized to him as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them in a way to get at me. He wouldn't accept it and said that I had gone above and beyond in defending him. Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Ben that I knew what he and Raj had done, and I wouldn't be forgetting it, and to watch his back. I made sure we weren't within earshot of anyone else. "Ben, can I have a word?" I asked, gesturing to a quiet corner. "What is it?" he replied, looking annoyed. I leaned in close and said in a low voice, "I know what you and Raj did. Don't think for a second that I'll forget it. Watch your back." Ben's face paled slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered before walking away. About 2 months later, Ben handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I've told this story to some people over the years, and I've been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Alex was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Raj. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be fighting for my own land, but here I am. My name's Jack, and I've been running my family's farm for the past 20 years. It's not a huge operation, but it's been in our family for generations. We're talking about 50 acres of good, fertile land just outside the city limits. I grow a variety of crops and even have a small orchard. It's honest work, and I love every minute of it. Everything was going fine until about a year ago when this fancy new housing development sprung up next door. You know the type. Cookie-cutter houses with manicured lawns and an HOA that thinks it runs the world. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Live and let live, right? Boy, was I wrong. It started with little things. I'd noticed people walking their dogs on the edge of my property. No big deal, I thought. Then I started finding trash in my fields, candy wrappers, soda cans, that kind of thing. It was annoying, but I figured it was just inconsiderate people. I had no idea what was coming. One day, I'm out checking on my crops when I see this guy in a suit walking around my orchard with a clipboard. I hop off my tractor and head over to him. "Can I help you?" I ask, trying to keep my tone friendly. He looks at me like I'm some kind of simpleton. "Oh, hello. I'm Brad Thompson, president of the Sunnyside Estates HOA. We're just doing a survey of the community green spaces." I blink at him, confused. "Green spaces? This is my farm. Private property." Brad laughs like I've just told the funniest joke he's ever heard. "Oh no, you must be mistaken. This land was designated as community property when the development was approved. Didn't anyone tell you?" My blood starts to boil. "Tell me? This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. There's no way it's community property." Brad just shakes his head and hands me a business card. "Look, why don't you come to our next homeowner association meeting? We can sort this all out." I take the card, but I'm fuming. As soon as Brad leaves, I call my lawyer, Sarah. She's been handling my family's legal matters for years, and I trust her completely. I explain the situation, and she promises to look into it. A week later, Sarah calls me back. Her voice is tense. "Jack, we've got a problem. Somehow the city approved a zoning change that includes your property as part of the Sunnyside Estates development. They're claiming it was all done legally, but something doesn't add up." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. "How is that possible? I never agreed to any of this." Sarah sighs. "I know, Jack. We're going to fight this, but it's going to be a tough battle. These developers have deep pockets and a lot of influence. Over the next few months, it's like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. The homeowner association starts sending me fines for violations. Not mowing my fields, having farm equipment visible, you name it. I ignore them all, of course, but it's infuriating. Then one morning in early spring, just as I'm getting ready to plant, I hear the rumble of heavy machinery. I rush outside to find a fleet of bulldozers and construction equipment rolling onto my land. Brad's there wearing a hard hat like he's some kind of big shot developer. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yell, planting myself in front of the lead bulldozer. Brad has the nerve to look annoyed. "Mr. Harrison, please step aside. We're beginning construction on the new community center and housing expansion." I don't move an inch. "Like hell you are. This is my property and you're trespassing." Brad signals to someone and suddenly 2 police officers are walking towards me. "Mr. Harrison, I'm afraid you'll have to leave. We have all the necessary permits and approvals." I'm shaking with rage, but I'm not stupid. I back off, but not before shouting, "This isn't over, Brad, not by a long shot." I call Sarah immediately and she files for an emergency injunction, but the wheels of justice turn slowly and by the time we get a hearing, the damage is done. They've cleared a huge section of my farm and started laying foundations for houses. The judge seems sympathetic to my case, but the homeowner association's lawyers are good. They've got a paper trail a mile long showing how everything was done by the book. The best we can get is a temporary halt to further construction while the case is fully investigated. I'm at my wit's end. My farm is in ruins, I'm bleeding money on legal fees, and it seems like the whole world is against me. But I'm not going down without a fight. I start digging. I talk to my neighbors, other farmers in the area, anyone who might have information about how this all went down. Slowly, a picture starts to emerge. It turns out Brad and his developer buddies had been planning this for years. They'd been buying up land all around the area, but my farm was the crown jewel they needed to complete their project. When I refused to sell, they got creative. I discover that the city official who approved the zoning change is Brad's brother-in-law. The community meetings where these changes were supposedly discussed, they were held at odd hours with minimal notice buried in the back pages of the local paper. Armed with this information, Sarah and I go back to court. This time, we're not just fighting the homeowner association, we're going after the city for corruption and the developers for fraud. The case drags on for months. Every day I have to drive past the half-built houses on my land, a constant reminder of what I'm fighting for. But I won't give up. This land isn't just property to me, it's my heritage, my livelihood, my home. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, we get our day in court. Sarah presents our evidence methodically, unraveling the web of lies and corruption that led to this mess. I take the stand and tell my story not just of the past year, but of the generations of my family who worked this land. The turning point comes when one of the city council members, racked with guilt, comes forward to testify. He lays out the whole scheme, the backdoor deals, the bribes, everything. I'll never forget the look on Brad's face when the judge delivers her verdict. She not only rules in my favor, but orders a criminal investigation into Brad, the developers, and the corrupt city officials. The aftermath is a whirlwind. Brad and his cronies are arrested. The half-built houses are torn down. The city issues a formal apology and compensation for the damage to my land. It's been a year since the verdict, and things are finally getting back to normal. My farm will never be quite the same. It'll take years for the land to recover fully, but it's mine, free and clear. The new housing development is still there, of course, but with new management. Turns out most of my neighbors there were just as appalled by Brad's actions as I was. We've reached an understanding. They respect my right to farm, and I don't mind if they want to walk along the edges of my property or buy fresh produce directly from me. Looking back, I realize this whole ordeal taught me something important. It's not enough to just tend your own garden, so to speak. You've got to be vigilant, to stand up for what's right even when it seems like the whole world is against you. As I watch the sun set over my fields, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. This land isn't just soil and crops. It's a testament to perseverance, to fighting for what's right, and as long as I'm around, that's exactly what I'll keep doing. The next one is a petty revenge story. So a friend of mine got married, bought a house, and then had a couple of kids. As he made his way through life, he got padding pools, a trampoline, bikes, the usual things that you get with a young family. Thing was that he works in a hospital, and a lot of the time the older people who had the kids years ago would be getting rid of stuff, most of it in really good condition, and they would ask if anyone wanted it, free to a good home kind of thing. So basically he had loads of really cool stuff for his kids. Neighbor's wife noticed and would nag her husband about it. My friend offered him some of the things, but he said that he wasn't a charity case and that he could look after his own family. Mate thinks he touched a nerve, so left it there. A while later, my friend got a swing set with a slide, so the neighbor got one too, only his was bigger and had a shed on top and is right up to the hedge so that when the neighbor's kids hang out, they are able to see in my friend's back garden and some of the house. So here comes the petty revenge. Mate comes to work and he is annoyed. He knows that if he just asked the neighbor to move the shed swing set, he would get laughed at. So he came up with a better solution. He would build a pergola, a heavy-duty one with a solid roof, and he needed some help. So most of the estate workers, a few doctors, and a couple of nurses went over to his house to help. By the time we had finished, there was a really cool treehouse-style kids' play area with railing all the way around a little dining area and a beautiful decorated shed all located on top of the pergola, looking into the neighbor's garden and blocking the neighbor's kids' view of his garden. He knew that this would really pee his neighbor off, so he made sure that everything could be removed. Takes him about 3 minutes to put up there and about the same to take down. Couple of days later, it's a nice day. He's in the garden, his kids are in the garden, all is good. Then the neighbor's kids appear on their shed, so my mate erects the pergola roof, playhouse, his kids play. Neighbor's kids get very angry and go and fetch their dad. Neighbor completely loses it. calling my mate all the names under the sun, threatening him with violence. All the time my mate is recording him, ends up with the neighbor saying that he's going to phone the police and storms off. About an hour later, the police turn up, talk to the neighbors, then they come round to my mate's house. He shows them it's not a permanent structure and takes it down. But all the while, the neighbors' kids are on top of their shed laughing and pointing at my friend, thinking he's getting in trouble. My mate says that the only reason he built it is that he doesn't want to have to deal with that every time he is in the garden. Also shows the police the view from his house and the rooms the neighbors' kids can see into. All the time this is happening, the neighbors' kids are waving at him and making rude gestures. Mate then shows the police the video. Police have seen and heard enough. They go back next door and tell the neighbor he has to take the shed slide thing down, and that if he doesn't, he will get done for breach of the peace as there is video evidence. Mate's kids still use the pergola treehouse, but know not to engage with the neighbors. The next one is an entitled people's story. Growing up, my family's orchard had always been a source of pride for us. The trees had been planted over 100 years ago by my grandparents and had been passed down from generation to generation. The fruit was the best in the area, and we always made sure to use every last bit of it, whether that meant making jams or selling it at the local farmer's market. As we grew older, my siblings and I took on more responsibility for maintaining the orchard. We learned the value of hard work and the importance of preserving our family's legacy. But when our neighbor Karen moved in, we had no idea that she would become our worst enemy. At first, Karen seemed pleasant enough. She was friendly and outgoing, and we thought we had made a new friend. But as time went on, we began to see a darker side of her personality. She was constantly complaining about one thing or another, and she seemed to take pleasure in making our lives difficult. Her complaints started small, like the fact that the leaves from our trees were falling onto her property. We tried to be accommodating and rake the leaves as often as we could, but it was a losing battle. Karen seemed to take it as a personal affront, and her complaints only grew more frequent and more aggressive. One day, Karen showed up at our doorstep with a demand. She wanted us to remove an old building that was partially on her land. The building had been there for as long as we could remember, and we had always used it to store our equipment and make jam. We tried to explain to Karen that we couldn't just tear it down, but she wouldn't listen. She threatened to sue us if we didn't comply with her demands. We were at a loss. We didn't want to lose the building, but we couldn't afford a lawsuit either. That was when we discovered that Karen was a member of the homeowners associations in our neighborhood. We had never paid much attention to the homeowners associations before, but we quickly learned that they had a lot of power over our property. Karen had been using her influence in the homeowners associations to try and force us out of the neighborhood. She had convinced several of our other neighbors to file complaints against us, and she had even gone so far as to hire a lawyer to try and force us to sell our land. We were devastated. Our family's legacy was under attack, and we didn't know what to do. But we refused to give up without a fight. We hired our own lawyer and started to fight back. We attended every homeowners association's meeting, and we made sure to document every interaction we had with Karen and the other neighbors. We also started to reach out to other members of the community and rally support for our cause. Karen started to escalate her attacks on our property. Trees that were closest to Karen's property started to get sick and die, and we found strange holes drilled into the trunks. We suspected Karen was behind it, but we couldn't prove it. Unfortunately, our troubles were far from over. Karen was furious about the fines and the attention she was getting from the town. She started to escalate her attacks on our property. Trees that were closest to Karen's property started to get sick and die, and we found strange holes drilled into the trunks. We suspected Karen was behind it, but we couldn't prove it. Then some of our jam went missing, and we had to put a lock on the building's door to stop the theft. But the worst was yet to come. One day we returned from town to find that the old building had been demolished, and a garage was being built in its place. It was clear that Karen had no regard for our family's history, and was intent on taking over our land. I was furious, and I knew I had to take action. After doing some research, I discovered that Karen had not obtained the necessary permits to demolish the building and build the garage. I reported her to the town, and she was hit with over $200,000 worth of fines. But that wasn't all. I had installed cameras around the property, and they caught Karen in the act of damaging our trees. She was hit with another fine for destruction of private property, And finally, it turned out that Karen had built her garage over the property line, and most of it was on our land. We filed for a permit to have the garage destroyed, and Karen was forced to pay for the demolition. She had thought she could bully us and take over our land, but she learned the hard way that she was not above the law. Justice had prevailed, and our family's farm was safe once again. But our troubles were not over yet. Karen was still a member of the homeowners associations, and she had convinced several other members to vote against us in an upcoming election. If she succeeded, she would have even more power over our property. We knew we had to do something to stop her. We started to campaign tirelessly, reaching out to every member of the homeowners associations and explaining our side of the story. We even went door to door, talking to our neighbors and asking for their support. Finally, the day of the election arrived. We were nervous, but we had done everything we could to win. As the votes were counted, it became clear that we had won by a narrow margin. We were overjoyed. We had beaten Karen at her own game, and we had protected our family's legacy. Update. Since the incident, Karen has moved away from our neighborhood and a new family has moved into her old house. We have since become good friends with our new neighbors, and they have even offered to help us with the harvest season. We are grateful for their kindness and happy to see that our orchard continues to thrive. As for Karen, we have not heard from her since she left, but we have heard rumors that she has been banned from the homeowners associations and is facing legal trouble for her actions against us. It's a shame that things had to end this way, but we are happy to see that justice was served. We have also taken steps to protect our property in the future. We have installed a security system and have made sure to document every interaction we have with our neighbors. We never want to go through something like this again, but we are confident that we can handle anything that comes our way. Our family's farm is our legacy, and we will do everything in our power to protect it. The next one is a pro-revenge story. We received a call to a house where a bariatric patient had fallen. The patient was morbidly obese and weighed around 30 stone, 420 pounds. However, this story is not about the patient. There are many reasons people reach this size, and I have never judged, only helped. The problem here was a really arrogant neighbor we had encountered before, and boy was this chap a judgmental moron. Our patient had a car and a disabled parking permit. They also had a council-designated disabled parking spot outside their home, which the neighbor kept parking in. There had been several letters from the council regarding this, and several parking fines served only to annoy this chap even more. On the day of the story, I took the call that the patient had fallen, and we went to the house. Sure enough, the neighbor was not only parked in the disabled spot, but had also parked a second car, blocking access to the patient's driveway. I assessed the patient and suspected they had a broken hip and needed to go inside. I sent my colleague to the neighbor to ask them to move the cars. When they came back, I was told that the neighbor had just told my colleague to do one. No problem, time to get the message home. I radioed our control center and asked for the fire service and police. We needed the fire service to help lift the guy and the police to do a little parking control. The fire service was the first to arrive, and I spoke to the crew commander to let them know what the situation was. A firefighter went to the house to ask the neighbor to move the car and was told the same thing as my colleague. The message was relayed back, and the watch commander just asked me one question. Is the patient's life at risk? I knew exactly where this was going, and it was time our thoughtless neighbor got the message. My answer was, yes, there is equipment I need to get into the house, and the driveway is blocked, preventing me from doing so. The watch commander told the fire truck driver to move those vehicles. It was really satisfying to see both vehicles being pushed down the road by the fire service, and the look on the neighbor's face as he came out spitting and screaming was well worth seeing. His complaints to the police fell on deaf ears. They were well aware of his history of obstruction, and my clinical assessment that the patient's life was in danger was more than enough justification for the vehicles to be moved. I doubt it made our patient's life any easier, and sadly they died a few months later without leaving the hospital, but it really did bring a smile to their face as we wheeled them out. The next one is a petty revenge story. I had a problem neighbor for so many years. He terrorized the area. He was a drug addict and dealer, which is his business, but don't make it my issue. Thus, we always had unsavory people popping up, breaking into houses, cars, stealing packages, etc. I know it's to do with him because he had previously admitted that it was his friends doing it, and I've seen CCTV footage from other neighbors showing his friends damaging cars, etc. He has stolen bank cards that came in the mail, makes the most obnoxious amount of noise that wakes me up, and his friends, fiends, almost always ring my bell in the dead of night, around 2:30 a.m. I've shouted at them so many times and have argued with him too. My neighbor has also been in prison multiple times for various things, including very serious crimes, so he would do well to keep his head low as a free man, you'd think. We live in a house converted into apartments, where there are 4 apartments and a main area downstairs to walk through where mail goes. He always leaves the main door open, which I'd ask him not to, so his friends can come and go. Sometimes they'd kick the door down and trash the area. Whenever I'd get a package and I wasn't home, the delivery person would leave the package unattended in the front garden or the main area outside my door, despite me instructing them not to. My package would be stolen by my neighbor/his friends in seconds. This went on for years, and when confronted, he'd deny it. But I knew it was him. Other 2 apartments are old people who I'm friendly with, who also dislike him. The issue is I never had any proof. I once called the police after he wrote a note to me apologizing for his friend stealing my package, but that went nowhere. This time I wasn't going to let my over £250 worth of stolen packages go amiss. I put up a camera in the main area. I saved the boxes from some other packages, placed an apple and some plastic bags in there for weight, set them outside, and within 5 minutes they were stolen by his friend who hadn't seen the camera. Gotcha! I called the police, who commended me on my setup skills, and they came over, but by the time they did, the guy had left the building, with packed bags that were definitely filled with drugs to sell. They told me they'd look out for him. A few weeks later, I get a call from the police about it. I also tell them I'm absolutely certain he sells Class A drugs and has been terrorizing the area. They tell me they'd pay me a visit. 5 days go by, and at 7 a.m. I get a call from the same officer asking me to open the door quickly and quietly. I do, and she tells me to go inside, but not before I see about 15 plain-clothed officers hiding behind a wall. I look through the peephole and they all storm inside, boot down his door, and arrest everyone inside. It was basically a crack house, as well as seize boxes of drugs. This was all caught on the camera I bought, so I sent the footage to the landlord. The police also get in touch with the landlord, and thus my neighbor is evicted on top of it. This was a month ago. None of his mail has been picked up, and I'm getting a lot of joy out of this. Moral of the story? Keep your hands to yourself. The next one is an entitled People Story. I like fresh ground pepper. My wife likes fresh ground pepper. My friends like fresh ground pepper. I particularly like it on my weekly Sunday breakfast, which, as it happens, takes place in the same local neighborhood diner as it has for 10 years. Alas, this diner deploys simple pepper shakers, inadequate for our tastes, so we bring along our own purse-sized mill. This diner, I should further point out, is generally patronized by regulars each Sunday morning, and we are on a smile and wave basis with most of them. As usual, this past Sunday, we were enjoying our breakfast, talking, laughing over stupid jokes. The usual. At the table to our immediate right was a couple about mid-50s, same as us, but unfamiliar to us, not regulars, and the man had a loud voice, so loud in fact that he made our conversation a little difficult. During a lull in our conversation, I heard him say, "Pass the pepper." My friends then mentioned that they were going for a bike ride later and wondered if we'd like to join them. I thought it over, and just as I was about to answer, I heard a scraping of a chair from the next table. Suddenly, the man with the loud voice was looming over our table. "I said pass the pepper, goddammit!" he barked, and reached across the table to grab my pepper mill. A cacophony of protests, surprise, queries, and exclamations followed. I managed to block his hand and looked up at him. "Hey, what are you doing?" I demanded. My friend, a very mild-mannered and gentle man, jumped to his feet and squared up. "Pass the pepper," the man snarled again. "What is so hard to understand?" I quickly slid the pepper mill off the table and into my pocket. Then I, too, stood up. "The pepper?" I asked. "You mean my pepper? That isn't the communal pepper." "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "I want the goddamn pepper!" At this point, his wife/girlfriend/companion, quicker on the uptake, realized his mistake and tried to get his attention. Roy, sit down, it's not Roy. Listen," she tried, but Roy, doubling down and in high dudgeon, was not to be denied. Get that ducking pepper out of your pocket and hand it over now! Eyes were uncomfortably on us. Other tables were watching this play out in surprise and shock. At this point, a server approached with her arms full of someone else's breakfast. "Hey guys! Not sure what's going on, but I have hot food here. Coming through!" As she passed, Roy shouted again, and this time threw his hands in the air in a "what the hell" gesture. It all happened in a blur, and before the server could dodge, she was covered in sunny-side-up eggs, home fries, and sausage. "Roy!" the woman screamed. "What the hell? Hey, watch out! Oh no!" And a dozen other exclamations from the onlookers erupted all at once. "Duck!" Roy shouted. "See what you ducking did?" His wife had scrambled to her feet to assist the server, who dropped the second plate as well. My wife also got up to help, and the owner, Donna, a sweet-faced 65-year-old, suddenly emerged from the kitchen. "What is going on?" she said, alarmed. Everyone started talking at once, and Roy, Alpha Roy, shouted over everyone. "This a hole indicating me wouldn't pass me the pepper," he roared. Donna gaped uncomprehendingly at him for a moment. She looked at the mess on the floor, the now red-faced and furious Roy, the other customers, and then at me. "He what? There's pepper on your table?" "Roy!" his wife screamed again. "Apologize now and sit down." "It's my pepper mill," I said again, "not the restaurant's." "Ducking, idiot," Roy shouted. "Why didn't you say something, a-hole?" I laughed out loud and looked with amazed surprise at my friend. He stared straight at Roy and said in a quiet but firm voice, "Listen to your wife and sit down." Donna looked around at the mess and confusion. At this point, approximately 45 seconds had elapsed since Roy first lurched to his feet to steal my pepper. "I think I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said to Roy. "I can't have this in my restaurant." Roy's wife, nearly in tears, began apologizing rapidly and repeatedly. Roy started protesting and demanding that he get to eat his breakfast. Donna, sweet-faced but tough, told him he could leave voluntarily, or she would have the police assist him. "Roy, now!" his wife said. She left a wad of money on the table and grabbed his arm, pulling him to the door. "I am so sorry," she said to Donna and the server. "I guess he loves his pepper too." The next one is an entitled parent story. It feels gaudy to post again so soon. In my last post, I mentioned that my mom miscarried in her recent pregnancy after a bad fall. Something didn't smell right about the information I got after all the comments I received about it. So I decided the only way I was going to get the truth was to go straight to the horse's mouth. So I went to see my parents on Sunday. They were both home and resting. They both looked like hell, too. My mom, aside from needing crutches to walk more than a few feet, had a lot of marks and bandages all over her face from that fall she took. And my dad, well, just see his description after the beating I gave him in my last post to see how he looked. My parents were beyond shocked I showed up, and I demanded to know if there ever really was a baby, or if it was all just some half-assed plan to guilt me for not coming home. My dad said I had a lot of nerve showing up and just letting myself in after what happened. But my mom broke down in sobs and said she really had been pregnant. She lurched into the bedroom and retrieved a small but kinda ornate-looking urn, and it had ashes inside it. I even checked to see if they looked or smelled like ashes from cigarettes or a barbecue or something, but they didn't smell anything like that. In fact, I barely smelled anything at all. I asked why they brought home the urn, claiming the ashes were in it before. I checked online and it said 7 to 10 days at least to get ashes back. And Mom was in the hospital no more than 5 days. My mom said they bought the urn online and expected to get the baby's ashes back when they went to the crematorium, and were really upset they couldn't bring the baby home yet, so they just waited until they could get the ashes a few days later, and then went out to get drunk. Mom claimed the crematorium did things a little quicker because she begged them. There were genuine tears in her eyes. I've seen her crocodile tears many times, but this didn't look like that. I got more information as to what happened about how my mom fell. She was running late to see her doctor, an OB-GYN or whatever they call them. Mom explained that she overslept while taking a nap and was trying to hurry out to make her appointment. Then she slipped on a toy while trying to get down the steps. The guardrails for the porch had rotted and broken off like 2 years ago, and Dad never fixed or replaced them. So my mom had nothing to grab onto in order to stop her fall. And down she went right off the porch and landed face and then belly into the ground. She even showed me marks all over her stomach from where she landed. She told me the baby would have been another boy. I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and there would have been 1 more brother. Then Mom told me that a doctor warned her against ever trying to have another baby because her body might not be able to handle it again due to her age and prior injuries. I kind of figured that was the case after some things people messaged me about it, but it didn't make it any easier to hear in person. Finally, I asked the big question, why did she blame me? Mom started to say that day they showed up at my apartment was just really bad or something like that, but Dad finally spoke up and interrupted her. He yelled that it's because it was all my fault. If I'd done like he said and moved back home at Thanksgiving, then I would have been there to help. And now a baby is dead because of me. I yelled at him that if he'd actually bothered to fix the damn porch, then Mom might not have ever fallen, and that's on him. Plus, he didn't even bother to tell me Mom was pregnant back at Thanksgiving. Not that it would have changed anything. We continued yelling at each other, and rather than side with anyone, my mom just left the room crying. My dad looked like a lit match from how red he was, and he brandished his old hunting knife at me while yelling to get out of his house. As I was leaving, he said I was no longer his son. I told him that I hadn't seen him as a father in years because he was always a terrible dad. But before I went out the door, I said to him that I'd be filing for a restraining order, and if he ever lays a hand on my siblings like he tried to do with me, then next time he'll lose more than a couple of teeth. And I won't hesitate to call the police or CPS if he tries the same crap with my siblings as he did with me. He yelled plenty of insults at me from the front door like, "You son of a idiot!" I said back that was an insult to Mom, and he got red in the face again. Then I gave him a 1-finger salute before riding away on my mountain bike. So yeah, I guess that's as good of an answer as I have for anyone. If this isn't the truth, then I don't know what is. But does it matter anymore? I'm filing for a restraining order as soon as I can, and I'll be looking to move apartments after I start bringing in money from my new job. I don't know if I'll feel like updating again after this. I'm just going to be depressed remembering all this. So I think I may be done here, unless my parents decide to do something bad to my siblings. But hopefully I've gotten my point across to them. I've already beaten Dad up twice, and he still looked somewhat afraid of me while clutching that knife. It felt like he was looking at a monster. Maybe I am in his eyes. But if my being a monster to him means he never hurts my siblings, then that's fine. I'll be the monster. The next one is an entitled people's story. As a landlord, I had always heard horror stories about difficult tenants, but I never thought I would have to go through one myself. I inherited a property in a small town in Arizona and decided to rent it out to supplement my income. It was a nice house with 3 bedrooms, a backyard, and a small garden. After putting up an ad, I soon found a tenant named Karen. At first, Karen seemed like a normal person, but things started to go south when she fell behind on rent. I tried to be understanding at first, but after several missed payments, I knew I had to take action. I gave her a warning and informed her that I would be evicting her soon. That's when the real trouble began. Karen started threatening me and telling me that she would have me arrested. She even claimed that she owned the property and that I was a fraud. I knew she was just trying to scare me, but I never expected what happened next. On the day of the eviction, I arrived at the property to find the police already there. Karen was claiming that I had broken into her house and that I was trying to evict her illegally. She had even gone as far as to break the windows herself to make it look like I had caused the damage. I tried to explain to the police that I was the owner of the property, but they refused to listen to me. I was arrested and spent the night in jail. The next day, I was able to call my lawyer, and he was able to get me released on bail. It was a terrifying experience, and I felt completely helpless. I knew I had to prove my innocence, but I had no idea how to do it. Thankfully, I had a friend who was a private investigator. I asked him to look into Karen's background, and he found out that she had a history of filing false police reports and scamming landlords. He was even able to find a witness who had seen Karen breaking the windows of the property herself. Armed with this information, I was able to prove my innocence in court, and Karen was charged with fraud and vandalism. The ordeal left me traumatized, and I made sure to be more careful with my tenants from then on. I did thorough background checks and made sure to get everything in writing. I even installed security cameras at the property to protect myself. Despite everything that had happened, I still believed in the goodness of people and decided to rent out the property again. This time, I found a tenant who was responsible and paid the rent on time. I was finally able to relax and enjoy the benefits of being a landlord. However, my peaceful life was once again disrupted when I received a call from my tenant, saying that there was a fire in the property. I rushed over to find that the house had been completely destroyed. The cause of the fire was unknown, but I suspected foul play. I was devastated. Not only had I lost my property, but I also felt violated. I didn't know who could have done something like this, but I was determined to find out. I hired a team of investigators to look into the matter, and after several weeks of searching, they were able to find out that the fire was started by Karen. Apparently, she had broken into the property and set it on fire in revenge for being evicted. She had even left a note saying that she would not be held accountable for her actions. I was shocked and disgusted by her actions. Karen was arrested again, and this time she was given a harsher sentence for her crimes. I was able to receive some compensation from my insurance, but it was nothing compared to the pain and trauma I had gone through. From that day on, I decided to sell the property and move on from being a landlord altogether. It was just too much stress and anxiety for me to handle. I decided to invest my money in something else, and I put the property up for sale. It took a while to find a buyer, but eventually someone came forward and made an offer. The price was lower than I had hoped for, but I was just happy to be rid of the property and move on from the whole ordeal. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I know this story because I am good friends with my neighbor. My neighbor, let's call him John, decided 8 years ago that he wanted to build a second story on his house. However, his property had a legal binding that prevented it from being renovated unless all surrounding neighbors agreed. This is called a covenant, and it can't be contested in the local council. This one was over 100 years old. All his neighbors, except one, let's call him Alex, agreed to let him renovate. Now, John is a big guy, ex-military and muscular. He has a wife and 2 children, but he is not quick to anger. About twice every year, John would write Alex polite letters asking him to lift the ban from renovating his house. And every year, Alex declined, complaining that it would be an eyesore. Literally every other house on our road has 2 stories but his, or that it would ruin the aesthetic of the street. Seriously? Alex was also a complete jerk and a hypocrite, playing loud music past midnight. Anyway, for 8 years, John would get turned down by Alex, and then suddenly Alex decided he was going to sell his house. The revenge was on. After he heard the news, John bought one of those professional metal signs that people put in front of their houses when selling, and put one in front of his own house. On it read something like, 5 new apartments being built. Get in quick. 2 sold already. 3 entire stories. Loud noise expected for a year. The number given on the sign was disconnected. This was repeated in Mandarin and Arabic as well. The sign was put right next to Alex's house on the edge of John's property. The auction for the house was going in a month, and Alex was quick to get a lawyer against John to make him put the sign down. I think it was because the sign was encroaching on his land. John wrote about 60 letters to the lawyer, and it cost about $50 for the lawyer to read each letter and give his legal advice to Alex. The lawyer contacted John and told him that if he did not take down the sign a week before the auction, they would take him to court. A week before the auction, John took the sign down, but he wasn't done. The day of the auction arrived, and John parked his 4 cars along the front of Alex's house so no one could see the "Auction Here" sign, and the auction goers couldn't park there. John has an inbuilt speaker system in his house and was blasting building sound effects and music throughout his house. He put back up the sign he put down and put another one up which read, "House Demolition Furniture Sale." John bought most of the furniture from his garage and the house outside on his lawn. If people came to buy something, he would overprice it outrageously because he didn't really want to sell his stuff. It was just to make the apartment construction more believable and give the auction goers a taste of how loud it will be. When the auction took place, we could barely hear the auctioneer, and when Alex complained to John about the noise, John said that he had the builders on a contract and didn't want to reschedule. The house was estimated to go for $3 million, but ended up going for $2.4 instead. Alex had to halt his construction of his new house because he didn't have the funds. Alex, who according to John sounded like he was seething with anger, phoned to tell John that he owes him $600,000. The new owners of the property lifted the covenant when John told them about his plan. "You guys should be thanking me. I saved you $600,000, John replied. The next one is a petty revenge story. I live in a rural and remote area that's mostly acreages. I get along with my neighbors, except for one man who lives across the road and about 100 meters down. He has 2 dogs that keep coming onto my property and chasing my chickens. They've killed a few, including my duck and rabbit when she escaped from her enclosure. I've asked the neighbor nicely to keep his dogs at home, but he just says that it's my problem because I free-range my chickens on my property. This man even went to another neighbor and criticized her for feeding her cat on her deck outside her back door because his dogs keep going over and eating the cat food and getting fat. I've called the police to find out what I can do, but since there are no dog bylaws, there isn't much I can do. A friend of mine moved her family down to the city to attend grad school and asked me if I would take her 2 Maremas, which are big livestock guardian dogs. They will protect my chickens from my neighbor's dogs. He messaged me tonight with a link with instructions on how to stop your dogs from barking. I lost it laughing. My dogs are constantly barking at his dogs at the perimeter of my property, which does not border his at all. His dogs are trying to come down my driveway and are running up and down the road all the time. I texted him back that my dogs are simply barking at his dogs when they try to come onto my property, and if he wants my dogs to stop barking, he needs to keep his dogs at home. There was no response from him, but within 5 minutes all the barking stopped because he called his dogs home. Now, every time I hear my dogs bark, instead of getting annoyed, I smile, knowing that my neighbor, whose dogs have been killing my animals, is annoyed, and that if he wants the barking to stop, he actually has to train his own dogs. The next one is an entitled people story. This happened when I was 12 years old, and I figured I'd share my experience with an entitled family who tried to steal my red-bone coonhound. I grew up on the family farm in the middle of nowhere. We own approximately 350 acres and have a ridiculously long driveway, and you can't see the house from the main road. So often people see our dogs and think they are lost and pick them up. We have collars with our contact info that are on them always because of this fact. My parents are big on not hunting or removing wild animals unless they are a danger to us. They always had the mindset that we are living in their home. They were here first. Just respect and be aware of your surroundings. For the most part, the wildlife leaves us and our livestock alone, other than Jacob, the black bear, breaking into the grain shed and elk eating hay bales. We had a fairly large cougar who learned that our llamas made easy meals. The cougar ate all 9 of them in less than a year. The last straw was when I was walking in the horse pasture and interrupted the big cat's lunch, last llama. Luckily, the family Pyrenees put himself between the cougar and me. I have no doubt if it wasn't for him, I would not be here today. My dad decided he had to do something. He truly didn't want to use lethal methods and started researching other options. He came across a breeder who breeds coonhounds and reached out. The breeder was extremely helpful and told my dad that most cougars have had some kind of run-in with hunting dogs, so they won't be as bold. So we bought a red-bone coonhound, after doing lots of research on the breed and making sure we could handle one. Gus Timber Chopper was flown from Virginia to Canada and quickly became a valued family member. As anyone knows with any hound, the nose goes down and the ears turn off. Gus became a favorite of all our neighbors as his wandering helps with predators and livestock. Life was peaceful other than a few trips to the shelter to pick up Gus. The peace would not last though enter entitled family. They saw our 5 dogs chilling on our property and decided they were abandoned or lost. Not the case, my brother and I were playing in the creek, and the dogs had wandered away not too far, but far enough that the family didn't see us. The entitled family then pulled off the road and got out of the vehicle and started trying to coax the dogs into their van. 3 of our dogs ran back to the creek where we were playing. Our Pyrenees, Togo, and Gus stayed. The entitled dad somehow caught Gus and started dragging him to their van. Gus started to freak out. He started to bark, alerting me that something wasn't right. So I went to see what was happening. Well, 12-year-old me saw some random guy trying to put Gus in his van, and the entitled kids and mom were gushing over how cute he was, and how he would be the perfect dog for them. I wasn't too nervous as this happens often. People see the dogs, no house, and think they are lost, or someone dumped them and try to help the owners by taking them to a shelter or vet, then often call or stop by to apologize or causing any inconvenience. I yelled out, "Hey, that dog isn't lost, he's with us!" The entitled kids started to scream that they wanted the dog and they deserved the dog. Then they burst into uncontrollable sobs. The entitled mom asked me to come closer so we don't have to yell. I politely declined and said again that Gus was ours and asked the dad to please stop. Entitled Dad grunted and tried to pick up Gus. Gus ended up biting the guy on his hand. He didn't break the skin, more of a warning nip. The entitled dad let go and Gus came running back to me. Entitled Dad looked furious and started to walk towards me and Gus, yelling that I shouldn't own dogs because clearly we don't train or properly care for them, and how much better of a home they could offer him. I was starting to panic because this guy looked so mad, raging about how he'll teach that red bastard proper manners. I'm backing away while holding on to Gus's collar. Togo quickly stood in front of me. I was begging the entitled dad to back off and to leave. Entitled Dad said something along the lines of, "I'm taking this dog to teach you a lesson. If you don't look after your pets, they will find a better home." I told him to stop as Togo is very, very protective of me and my brother, and while he has lots of training as he started showing signs of being too aggressive with people, and we didn't want him to bite someone unprovoked. Entitled Dad did stop for a moment, but the entitled mom and kids were screaming that they wanted this dog. It had to be this dog. Togo gave entitled Dad lots of warnings, low growls, bared teeth, lunging and snapping. Entitled Dad tried to grab Gus by the collar and ended up knocking me down. Togo latched onto the entitled Dad's arm and started to shake his head and yanking the guy off his feet. One of the other dogs, she belonged to my uncle, came after I screamed and grabbed entitled Dad by his pant leg, ripping them. My brother also joined because he heard me scream. I got him to take Gus and told him to run home and get Dad. Togo wouldn't listen when I tried to get him to let go. Entitled kids and Mom tried to get out to help. Thankfully, they listened when I screamed, "Stop." Entitled Dad was yelling to call the dog off, and how he would see to it that all of our dogs would be put down, and that we would never be allowed to own another again. At this point, I was scared, angry, and overwhelmed. I started to cry. I thought that Togo would be put down for sure, and that if entitled Dad took us to court, he'd somehow get Gus. Togo let her entitled Dad's arm go, but made it clear that entitled Dad was to stay on the ground. Anytime he tried to stand, Togo would knock him down and growl in his face. My dad came racing down the driveway, ready for war. Entitled family started saying how Togo attacked unprovoked and that I misunderstood what they were doing. My dad told the family that the police and an ambulance would be arriving and that they'd best stay put, and if they decided to drive away, that he has pictures of the dad and vehicle, and he will press every kind of charges he legally can. My dad called some neighbors to come to help if things go sideways. The police and ambulance arrive. Entitled Dad will need stitches in his arm. They told the police that they thought the dogs weren't mine and I was lying and the kids want a dog so bad, but they didn't want to pay for one. They saw ours and thought they were strays. None of our dogs looked like strays, well-fed, brushed, and spoiled. Entitled Dad then said when I told him to stop or he could get hurt, he took it as I was threatening him, and that's why he didn't listen. He and his wife were demanding that Togo be put down immediately, and that we are animal hoarders who need to be charged and banned from owning any kind of animal. The police and paramedics told him he was very lucky. Togo is a guardian dog. They are bred for being protectors. Togo was only trying to protect me. Entitled Dad didn't care. He took us to court. Entitled Dad got 34 stitches in his arm. In the courthouse, entitled Mom came to my parents and said she had an offer. If they accepted, they'd drop the lawsuit. They wanted us to give them Gus. Dad told her to pound sand in a less polite speech. In the end, thanks to the game cameras Dad had in various places, we had footage. The judge was less than amused, as entitled family made it sound like I ordered my dog to attack them when they just wanted to play with the dog. The judge pointed out that a 12-year-old girl versus a 40-something grown man was not a fair fight, and that my dogs just evened the odds. We did have to isolate Togo and made sure that our dogs had microchips and their tattoos were legible. Dad also decided that he'd fence off my brother and my favorite places so that the dogs can't wander. I do wonder sometimes about entitled family, and I have 2 questions I'd love to ask. After all the expenses, wouldn't it have been cheaper to just buy or adopt a dog rather than steal one? The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm an English teacher. I love the job. I mostly love my students and their parents. I feel blessed that most parents are good people. They are worried about their children's progress and can be angry, but can always be reasoned with. I get positive feedback on my teaching and managing my classes and the students. Parents are generally happy with me. Unfortunately, I still have to deal with entitled parents from time to time, the Karens of parenthood. This year, I have 4 classes of last year's students. They will take their exams, and with a bit of luck, I can shake their hands at graduation and wish them the best in their future education and life when they get their diploma. To get to that point, they still need to take exams for their subjects, mine included. They can work in digital books or in their regular paper-bound ones. I don't really care what works best for them. I also don't mind tutoring, but I have my conditions. You do your homework, you pay attention. If, when you think you understand, you can start on the homework. You do not interrupt me when I'm talking explaining. You ask questions. Basically, the basics of what a student should do. This class knows exactly what the days and times are of their test, including the material. I made those dates known 2 months in advance, as I know that some really could use that time. I have uploaded everything in Google Classroom concerning the materials of the last 3 tests, along with links and materials for extra practice. Enter entitled student, ES. ES doesn't work on my subject in class. I've corrected him numerous times, sent numerous emails to his parents and team lead about his behavior, and have had many meetings with all parties involved. Promises are made by him and his parents about bettering himself. He knows and understands that what he does isn't good for him and doesn't help create a healthy learning environment. For added info, he doesn't have any learning difficulties, mental health issues, or anything. This behavior was known in primary school and the years before. School isn't a priority, his own words. I have offered tutoring on the previously named conditions and told him that with his current behavior, he can't get my tutoring. He's free to ask other teachers, but at the risk they will ask me about him, refer him back to me, and/or refuse him. Both him and his parents understand that and have said so. They agreed with what was said. To the story, exams are coming up. He has not done a thing. Every piece of advice has been given and a lot has been practiced. They are drilled on all the strategies, tricks, and everything they might encounter. Then, the week before the holidays, there are no classes. Students can make appointments with teachers, or teachers can invite students for extra help, etc. I have sent 2 different emails to 2 different groups per class. Both students and parents got this email. One saying that the said student is more than welcome to come at XYZ time if needed. But I need to know if a student comes and what they want to know so I can provide material. I sent a couple of links with extra material to practice for good measure. I sent another email to another group per class. I basically told the parents and students that although I'm disappointed that they didn't do the work in and for class for the exams, I'm willing to tutor them at YYS time in this week. Same amount of time as the students who did put in the effort, along with material and links. Why did I do this? Quite simple. I want my students to pass. Some were lazy because they had good grades and understanding of the material. However, some don't and are just lazy. I don't want them to fail and then retake the year. Also, it puts me in the parents' and school's good books, in case things go to heck. The same information is also posted in their Google Classroom space. I get several responses thanking me for my time and effort, especially for those who didn't do a thing in class. 3 students took me up on the offer. They came, we discussed some things, and they practiced some more. So, the week for tutoring ends, time slots are over, and then it happens. I got an email from entitled parent, EP, mother to ES, last Friday evening. She wanted to know if there was another possibility for her son to have some tutoring. Since I needed to reply to a different email, I also responded to EP and told her no. The holidays start on Monday, this Monday. Last for 2 weeks. Mondays are my day off. Tuesday I am not at school due to private matters. Husband has surgery, I'm taking him. And Wednesday is the test for my subject. He's had the entire week to come to the different times stipulated in Google Classroom and the email. For good measure, I asked if a colleague wanted to help in our teacher group chat. 3 said that they wouldn't mind. I suggested to EP to email these colleagues of mine and see if one of them has time on Monday, Tuesday before the exam on Wednesday. On Saturday, EP sent an email to me demanding that I tutor her son, ES. Her reasoning? He needs it, so I should just do it. He's my student and it's my job, no one else. I've got holidays now, so I should have plenty of time to help her son out. I don't respond. It's my holiday, and after 2 near burnouts, I've learned my lesson about not working in the holidays. It's Wednesday now, and this woman has sent no less than 22 emails. I just had contact with a colleague who is like the team lead of my department of students. He is pissed and will deal with it. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.